What's up, Rovers? For those of you that clicked on this video, know that this is a follow-up to the complete Camellya guide that I uploaded a few days ago. This is a full team building guide for her with all team variants, gearing, and rotations. Due to its depth and length, I've chosen to split it off into its own video. If you're interested in a full breakdown on everything Camellya, please check out my previous video at the top right. Alright, let's get started. Camellya is a main DPS, meaning she fits in Hypercarry or dual DPS comps. Hypercarry has the option to run traditional non-swap or Quickswap, both with their advantages and disadvantages. Note that all Camellya showcases today will be done with Havoc set because it has equal or higher DPS than lingering tunes for without penalizing character swaps. It is assumed you have 115 to 120 ER on her if you're using Dreamless, or 125 if using Crownless. Dual DPS Camellya teams are entirely Quickswap because it is the only way to get team rotations down to a reasonable length, since she herself occupies a large portion of non-swap field time in every team for her bottom half when she enters budding mode. Note that every team rotation listed today was designed with highest priority being maximizing team DPS. Therefore, charging Concerto ASAP is the highest priority for supports, and all DPS must use all of the important parts of their kit every rotation. This means that Hypercarry teams can choose between Shorekeeper, better suited for non-swap Camellya, or Verina for Quickswap Camellya. Because Camellya requires intro to set up her buffs and Quickswap wants to set up both DPS at the same time, the better support for dual DPS teams is Verina. It is theoretically possible to do dual DPS Shorekeeper with her, but it makes rotations unnecessarily complicated with a good chance of DPS loss to the point that it isn't usually any better than Verina. Now, if you have Shorekeeper's S1, then dual DPS Camellya with Shorekeeper becomes more realistic, but I really wouldn't recommend it until you have Shorekeeper's S2. We'll be starting off with traditional Hypercarry setups with non-swap and Quickswap variants. This will also include other sub-DPS options, but all of them share the main core of Camellya occupying most of the time on field. Later onwards, we'll reach the dual DPS setups with increasingly complicated rotations and requirements. In other words, this video will go from the easiest Camellya teams to hardest. Hopefully you'll find some team cops and rotations interesting to pick up. Let's go. First up is the traditional obvious pick, Shorekeeper Sanhua Camellya. This team features an insanely fast Concerto sub-DPS with a fast Concerto support that grants solid crit buffs to offset Camellya having crit damage instead of crit rate nodes. Sanhua deals great personal damage in the 3 seconds she spends on field, while also granting a massive 38% outro buff to amplify basic attacks for 14 seconds of the next Resonator. By far the easiest Camellya team to play, you simply rotate Shorekeeper into Sanhua into Camellya. You have the option to go pure red mode, white mode, or mixed modes on Camellya depending on preference. Shorekeeper on healing stat should reach 250 ER in combat. Remember, her inherent skill gives 10 only while her ult is up, and you can get another 10 from Fallacy's passive, so only 230 or 240 ER out of combat needed. Sanhua only needs 110 ER, which is already achieved with Moonlit Set's 2-piece effect. Shorekeeper's rotation is quite simple, but a small tech can be used to decrease Sanhua's field time. If you hold Heavy Detonate immediately after her liberation and skill cast cancel at the exact moment the first detonate hit goes forwards, you will break both liberation and skill ice constructs instantly, skipping the usual delay going into liberation into skill into detonate. Then Heron and swap into Camellya. She will do her full-length rotation as normal. Just make sure you use some variant of her full basic chain with white to red mode skill, either at the start or end of her top rotation. Then later ephemeral into DPS for her bottom rotation. Make sure to skill again before outroing her so that you start next rotation in white mode. Now, the Quickswap version of this team features Verina instead of Shorekeeper. Another super fast Concerto unit like Sanhua, Verina's main draw on Camellya teams is not needing her own intro, allowing you to double intro Camellya to start setting up her rotation sooner. This allows you to play Sanhua's entire rotation inside of Camellya's to save over 2 seconds. Camellya can outro into Sanhua instead to preset Heron for the next rotation, while easily leading into Verina's basic 3-4-5 combo. This team is especially good for high investment Sanhua builds with big DPS weapons like Emerald of Genesis, because the extra Quickswap windows give her more chances to produce Concerto instead of relying on Overture's passive. Note that Sanhua's S5 has an unlisted effect that grants her an extra 15 Concerto when manually detonating her Liberation Glacier, which is a huge part of why this team flows so well. Verina on healing set really wants 240 plus ER on this team to liberation every rotation for faster concerto if you don't have her S2. Sanhua only needs 110 ER, which again is already covered by Moonlet's 2-piece effect. Whenever possible, you want to manually swap into Verina instead of introing to her to do the rotation. This skips her to basic 3-4-5 while ensuring she stays on the ground. Always outro Verina into Camellya. Sanhua can comfortably get 2 basics during heavy pruning if needed for extra concerto. Then when Camellya is about to slam on her basic 4-hold 5, swap to Sanhua and slam down instantly to cast liberation. Hold heavy detonate immediately after, and skill cast cancel at the exact moment the first detonate hit goes forward to skip delay and quickly outro her, all in less than 3 seconds. Then Camellya does her bottom half rotation, skilling into ephemeral and doing her big spin before dismounting with skill into Sanhua. This grants Sanhua extra concerto for smoother rotations while allowing you to pre-Heron cancel into Verina basic 3-4-5 for the next rotation. If you do not have Sanhua's S5 or do not have Overture, then use this alternate rotation instead. The only difference is an extra skill plus detonate at the top of every rotation. The next best pick for comfortable Camellya teams is Havoc Rover. The reason is twofold. Rover at S2, which everyone gets for free, has a big damage 6 seconds short rotation. She deals 75% of her typical rotation damage in only about 40% of the field time. Once we get Rover's S4, she will also bring 10% Havoc Shred for the team. While nowhere near as strong as a buffer as Sanhua, Havoc Rover's raw damage has the potential to deal far more damage to even things out, especially with Dreamless's unique bonus effect with her. The gist of the rotation is fitting an out-of-rotation Rover skill cast 12 seconds apart from her usual on-field presence. This grants extra 14 concerto for faster Dark Surge state activation. Her S2 allows her to skill, Dark Surge, and then skill again for even more 14 concerto when she on-fields later. Combining this all together gives her enough ult energy and concerto to instantly ult Dreamless and outro. Unlike the Sanhua team, it does not matter if you pick Shorekeeper or Verina here, but it is required to swap in Rover 12 seconds apart from her normal on-field window to get the extra skill cast. Verina on healer set should be on 240 plus ER to ult every rotation for a smoother experience, but 200 is doable. Shorekeeper has the same requirements, being healer set with net 250 ER in combat with her ult active, accounting for inherent skill and whether or not you use Fallacy or Rebel. Both versions open with Rover skill, but you will have to squeeze it in elsewhere in the second plus rotation. This will lead into either Verina or Shorekeeper doing their entire rotation burst before swapping into Camellya, who TPSs before Rover in this team. It is recommended to squeeze in 2 basic hits for concerto with Rover during Camellya's heavy pruning. On the second rotation onwards, when Camellya is about to do her white mode slam, you will want to swap to Rover and cast skill. Then lead into Camellya's bottom half DPS rotation, skilling to ephemeral, and doing your big spin before dismounting with skill to white mode into Rover intro. You'll aerial slam down, skill into heavy to activate Dark Surge, immediately cast Life Taker, and Liberation Nuke into Dreamless outro. If you're playing Verina, end the rotation by outroing into Camellya so she can stack buffs early next rotation. Then manually swap into Verina. If you're playing Shorekeeper instead, then you'll end of Rover's outro into Shorekeeper. She runs her entire rotation to Camellya's top half, and you will squeeze Rover's bonus skill cast during heavy pruning. If not Sanhua or Rover, the last traditional Hypercarry Camellya team is with Danjin. I would not advise this team unless you really like Danjin, as it is the much harder to play than Sanhua or Havoc Rover team variants with similar overall team DPS because of very tight backswap windows and Danjin having very fast chains that make it easy to mess up. Timing is crucial because you only use her enhanced Forte Heavy or Liberation each rotation and not both. To match Sanhua and Havoc Rover variants, Danjin must also be well invested. Danjin is played as a sub-DPS to grant her massive 23% Havoc Amplified to Camellya, which will notably apply to Camellya's Liberation and Dreamless as well, which Sanhua doesn't, but does take noticeably longer to rotate than Sanhua or Havoc Rover. I would not recommend playing this team with Shorekeeper unless S1 because it is very likely to exceed a 30 seconds team rotation, but otherwise just replace the Verina part of the rotation with Shorekeeper. Verina on the healing set really wants 240 plus ER in this team to liberation every rotation for faster concerto if you don't have her S2 to keep team buffs clean. Danjin has the option to run 5-piece Havoc or 5-piece Moonlit. Crownless is a bigger damage buff for her than Dreamless. The Sonata set you pick will determine her choice of moves during Camellya's back swaps, as there's no better moment to cast Crownless for Danjin. She should open the fight with applying Incinerating Will debuff to the enemy before manual swapping to Verina to run her basic 3-4-5 rotation into outro on Camellya. You prep Heavy Pruning, then either reapply Incinerating Will, or if you're on Havoc Crownless, double skill into Crownless. You swap back into Camellya to finish her area hold, then when she's about to start the slam, swap back to Danjin to finish her rotation. If Incinerating Will expired, reapply it. Otherwise, use Basic ×3 and Skill ×3. On the first rotation, you'll follow this up with Liberation into outro because you want to preserve Danjin's Forte bar for buffs. Alternate this with a full Forte Heavy instead on every other rotation. Remember to cast Heron before outro if on Moonlit set. Then you run Camellya's bottom half with Liberation into Skill plus Ephemeral. Hold to DPS and skill back to white mode before outro back onto Danjin to start a new rotation. Reapply Incinerating Will and then manual swap to Verina for a basic 3-4-5 to continue. Now if we look at experimental hypercarry teams that work, Yinlin and Zhezhi are a good fit for Camellya as well despite lacking synergy as they bring good raw DPS. But if these are the only built up DPS you have, then you'll be glad to know they're super comfy. They basically build part of their Forte bar in Concerto during heavy pruning to shorten the time it takes to do their big mechanics before swapping off. Yinlin should be at 120 ER on Moonlit set, but if you can get her to 130 ER, you can skill, then Liberation plus second skill to get bonus Concerto. I don't know why this happens, but it does. You will lose all the alt energy from your first skill cast though when you do this, which is the reason why you need higher ER. Zhezhi needs 115 to 120 ER on Moonlit set. In both cases, you open with your Liberations and either skill twice on Yinlin to swap off, or one full basic chain on Zhezhi. Then swap into Verina's basic 3-4-5 chain with full outro and set up Camellya's heavy pruning. In this back swap, Yinlin should cast basic 2-3 plus Heron, whereas Zhezhi will cast basic 1-2 plus Heron. Swapping slow and going into the air with Heron is fine because we swap back to Camellya's basic 4-hold 5 anyways. When she's about to slam, swap back to Yinlin or Zhezhi to finish the rotation. Yinlin will perform basic 2-3-4 plus heavy and then Forte outro into Camellya, whereas Zhezhi will aerial slam down then run the standard skill plus basic skill ×3 into outro. You then run Camellya's entire bottom half rotation with the intro slam into Liberation. Skill plus Ephemeral hold to DPS and skill back to white mode before outro back onto Yinlin or Zhezhi and repeat from the top. If you're playing this team with Shorekeeper instead, just replace Verina's lines with Shorekeeper rotation. On the first cycle, lead with Shorekeeper's basic 1-2-3-4 plus heavy plus swamp before going into Yinlin's or Zhezhi's Liberation. We now enter dual DPS setups for Camellya. Note that these only work with Verina unless your Shorekeeper is S1, because the timings are either too tight, have a good chance of exceeding Shorekeeper's default 30-second Stella realm, or prevent you from running double intro Camellya or other units properly. Let's first open with Yao dual DPS. This is the easiest of the three main dual DPS setups because Camellya quite literally can't weave her rotation properly. However, she has a special tool to fix this. You know how Yao has a million backswap windows, but they only last about 1 second long. Camellya can keep swapping in to throw a heavy pruning, removing large segments of her Forte bar to charge a Concerto. By the time Yao's finished DPSing, you can immediately swap onto Camellya for Ephemeral to do her big DPS rotation. Verina on healing set really wants 240 plus ER in this team to Liberation every rotation for faster Concerto if you don't have her S2. Yao should be on 5-piece Void Thunder with Tempest Mephis or 2-piece Lingering Tunes with Mech Abomination. Both are pretty comfortable to play here. We use the shorter Yao rotation without the extra basics and double skill to end, so you will need 120 ER on him. We open with Yao's skill to tap for Forte bar and Concerto. Then you manual swap into Verina's basic 3-4-5 chain with full outro into Camellya. Once you slam down and queue a heavy pruning, swap back to Yao and Echo plus Liberation. You skill and swap cancel him to cast Camellya's second heavy pruning. Swap back to Yao and slam down plus Law of Rains. Swap back to Camellya for third heavy pruning. Swap back to Yao and run a full basic 1-2-3 chain to Law of Rains again. Swap back to Camellya for a fourth heavy pruning. Swap back to Yao, run another basic 1-2-3 instead of skill plus slam and cast final Law of Rains and then outro into Camellya. She should intro here. If you have Crownless, slam down, Echo plus Liberation cancel plus skill. Otherwise, you can aerial skill plus Liberation cancel. Then Ephemeral into your DPS phase with 1-2-3 hold 4. Skill bound back to basic white hair and outro into Yao. skill if desired, then manual swap to Verina basic 3-4-5 to reset the team. Now the next step up in team complexity is Changli. She can actually weave her entire rotation seamlessly with Camellya and does not require stuff like heavy pruning spam on the Yao build. On the other hand, most of this team's combat is aerial and very action heavy with tight timing, so it may take some time to get used to it. Changli's Phoenix form will be our primary way of building true sight stacks, so I would strongly recommend running Changli on 2-piece Mech Abomination on this team for much more comfortable playstyles. It is only a 5% damage loss versus Inferno Rider, but you don't have to worry about squeezing in that long move. She should have 120 ER, whereas Verina on healing set really wants 240 plus ER on this team to Liberation every rotation, for faster Concerta if you don't have her S2. You open with Changli's Echo plus Liberation, and then Flaming Sacrifice swap cancel into Verina's basic 3-4-5 chain combo. She full outros into Camellya to set up her buff stacks. When you cast Heavy Pruning, swap to Changli and cast Skill. Swap back to Camellya and finish basic 4 hold 5, and then when the slam is about to begin, swap back to Changli to auto Phoenix. You will then skill cast again and swap back to Camellya, slamming down to the ground. If Crownless, cast plus dodge cancel. Cast skill to go into red hair mode and swap back to Changli for a final ground stab to build a second inflamement stack. Swap back to Camellya and Liberation plus Ephemeral, then DPS phase with basic 1-2-3 hold 4 plus skill to drop back to white mode and cast Dreamless Outro into Changli. She will then Phoenix, slam down and basic 3-4. As soon as basic 4 begins, Echo cancel and stab to get your 4th inflamement stack. Flaming Sacrifice plus Liberation plus Flaming again to end the first rotation. You outro into Camellya to reset the team, and listen carefully for the second rotation because it's a bit different. This time, Verina will outro into Changli instead, since Camellya already has access to her Forte bar. You Phoenix in plus skill plus swap into Camellya, slam down and heavy pruning, swap to Changli to stab second inflamement, and skill swap back into Camellya's aerial basic 4 hold 5 chain. Just as she's about to slam, swap back to Changli to auto Phoenix for your 3rd inflamement stack. Slam down with either character and then swap to Camellya to Crownless dodge cancel into Liberation. Now do your skill into red mode plus Ephemeral to DPS phase. Basic 1-2-3 hold 4, skill back to white mode and Dreamless outro into Changli. This time her Phoenix intro gives her the 4th inflamement stack. Land and immediately Flaming Sacrifice. Liberation into another sacrifice, and outro back into Camellya to start rotations 3. The final dual DPS team for Camellya is Jinhsi. This is by far the most complex dual DPS team for her. It juggles multiple buff timers to transition Jinhsi states and aerial combos to maintain height with Camellya Quickswaps inside of Jinhsi's timers to progress both units' combos seamlessly. This is not for the faint of heart, and it does big damage, easily clearing 3-star Scarred as 0 despite him having 50% resist to both Spectro and Havoc. Jinhsi should be at 120 to 130 ER on 5-piece Spectro set. It is strongly recommended to use Jue due to the amount of aerial combat in this team rotation, as Jue can be used while airborne whereas Morning Ikes can't. Otherwise, cast Morning Ikes to cancel Overflowing Radiance low motion value move before going into Liberation every other Jinhsi mini rotation. Verina absolutely needs to have at least 240 ER in this team healer set because Jinhsi is dependent on Verina's coordinated attacks from it to build incandescent stacks for her Dragon Puke. Note that this is a double Dragon Puke team rotation. You open with Jinhsi's 4x basic to enable Overflowing Radiance for 5 seconds. Do not cast it. Swap to Verina so that we can get our basic 3-4-5 rotation done with a 5 seconds window. You're allowed to cast Overflowing Radiance. Do not use Verina's aerial basic combo to finish her outro. Swap back to Jinhsi, rapidly cast Skill Echo and Liberation to cancel all animations and enter Incarnation for 10 seconds. Cast Crescent Divinity and immediately swap back to Verina to use aerial ×2 and outro into Camellya. You will slam down and heavy pruning, immediately swap to Jinhsi and do Incarnation basic 1 and 2 optionally the start of 3. Then swap back to Camellya to continue her aerial basic 4 hold 5 chain. As she starts the slam, swap back to Jinhsi and complete the final Incarnation basic 4 and immediately cast her Dragon Puke skill. If you did everything right, Jinhsi completed her entire top half rotation, and Camellya is now ready to DPS. Swap her in and cast Crownless if needed and Liberation cancel. Skill into red hair mode plus Ephemeral to DPS with basic 1-2-3 hold 4, plus skill back out to white hair before outroing with Dreamless into Jinhsi again. Jinhsi will now run her bottom half rotation, the typical 2x skill Incarnation basic ×4 plus Dragon Puke. She will outro into Camellya to enable her Forte and start the second team rotation. Slam down and swap into Verina basic 3-4-5 chain. This time you can finish Verina's entire rotation and outro into Jinhsi. Cast Overflowing Radiance plus Echo plus Liberation cancel. Then Crescent Divinity before going back to Camellya again, slamming down to heavy pruning. Once again, swap to Jinhsi to do Incarnation basic 1-2, hopefully the start of 3, and swap back to Camellya to finish her aerial basic 4 hold 5 chain. As she's about to slam, swap back to Jinhsi, finish Incarnation basic foreign caster Dragon Puke. Then outro into Camellya, set up Prowess into Liberation, skill into Red Hair mode plus Ephemeral. DPS again with hold spam, then skill back to white mode and outro into Jinhsi to do her bottom half rotation. Skill times 2, Incarnation basic times 4, Dragon Puke, and outro into Camellya to repeat everything. Finally, per request, I have an experimental triple DPS mommy team to showcase. I won't fully explain it, you can just see it for yourself. I don't recommend doing that, but hey, this was the name of the team I was given. All I'll say is 130 ER for Yinlin, 120 ER for Changli, 115 to 120 Camellya of Dreamless, else 125 for Crownless. You need to do the skill liberation skill trick for Yinlin to fast gen Concerto so we can early intro onto Camellya to set up. If you do this team is literally too slow. It requires 130 ER on Yinlin because you lose the ult energy of Yinlin's first skill cast every rotation doing this. Basically, you're trying to treat Yinlin like Verina and do it as fast as possible. Note that Yinlin will be carrying Bell instead of Heron on healer set because this is a Quickswap team and she outros early into further Quickswap between Camellya and Changli, which would normally remove Heron's buff. And that's it for the Camellya team building guide. Thank you so much for watching through this entire video. I hope this has been useful for setting up and playing her teams. As a reminder, all spreadsheets documenting my testing can be found in the description and pinned comment. If you need a refresher on Camellya herself, do feel free to check out her complete guide down there too. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Stick around if you want to see interesting videos. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.